We wanted to discuss some more election results from Florida. Conservative candidates Roberto, Alonso, and Monica Colucci won in Miami Dade school board elections, making Miami-Dade the largest county in America with a conservative school board majority. Both Alonso and Colucci were endorsed by the state's governor, Ron DeSantis. So this is being kind of presented as victory for DeSantis, and it really is, because if his kind of high-profile battles with school policies, critical race theory, don't say gay, etc., if those were unpopular and were inviting blowback from voters, then you would have expected to see those candidates not fare well. The fact that conservatives are taking over school districts, kind of replicating the success the GOP had in Virginia last year with Youngkin, etc., I think it does go to show once again that this is the most favorable territory for Republicans to run on, is battles about what's going on in schools, what's being taught in schools. This clearly animates some voters who are otherwise not maybe down with other Republicans or are not drawn by Republican candidates or ideas, but are parents and are concerned about what's going on. This is true anecdotally when I talk to people, people who can have a range of views or are consider themselves independents or Democrats on other issues are freaked out about schools.
Yeah, look, it's obviously something that's resonating with a lot of people. Both Alonso and Colucci have as part of their platforms these two critical points. One, oppose critical race theory and other extreme liberal agendas that harm our kids, and two, protect female athletes and the integrity of female sports. Boys can't compete in girls' athletics as a part of an additional addendum on that on Roberto's platform. And, Democrats are going to have to realize that if they don't want their kids to not be able to talk about, slavery or the reality of the founding fathers having slaves and the complex history of the United States of America, they're going to have to compete in school board elections or go to other parts of the country. And that is what it is.
No. Well, okay, so I don't know that anyone has said, I haven't heard anyone say it, and in fact, I've heard Republicans, including the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Winsome Sears, African-American Republican Lieutenant Governor, say that the intention behind the fights over curriculum, there is no intention to make it so that you cannot teach that there was slavery in America or something like that.
Okay. I had a debate with Charlie Kirk about this, and he was very clear that he thought that me saying that people like founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, who, obviously contributed a lot to the fabric of what we think it means to be in America and had a lot of really important Enlightenment ideals that we still live by, was also a slave owner that repeatedly raped his slave and had slave children who he did not free from slavery. That's a mixed bag, and I think it's fair to talk about both of those things as we consider these historical figures, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I agree.
He interpreted that as being unfair to Thomas Jefferson and said I was being too harsh. I said, I'm acknowledging all of the good things as well. I don't understand why you can't acknowledge the bad. And that's the conversation that I've typically had with people. But if they are happy to teach slavery and if they teach, the reality of our complex checkered racial history in this country, then it's not really clear to me what exactly it is that they're objecting to. The
objection that I understand is more in a kind of HR diversity sort of setting, making the kids feel like there are these vast racial categories. This sometimes comes from activists.
What's a vast racial category?
That if
what does that look like?
That if black kids are not performing as well, it's because they're black, or they have different ways of teaching, or that hard work is associated with being with Western colonialism, those kinds of things.
Take this one at a time?
Sure.
So the idea is, it's impossible. We're outlying. If research shows that black kids are being treated or something differently in the schools, we're not allowed to consider that.
No.
That's bans?
No, you can't tell them that you're not succeeding because black people historically don't prize hard work or strong families or all of those things. These are ideas that come out of critical race theory agenda, aspects of white supremacy, handouts that have been all over activist educational websites and training materials that are very bad. Those are things that some people have said,
but they don't have anything to do with what critical race theory is.
They're adjacent to critical race theory.
No. No. critical race theory is a legal doctrine that was developed by people like Derek Bell at Harvard Law School in the 1990s.
Okay, these people cite critical race theorists as their inspiration for their theories.
Derek Bell would have thought that telling some kid that he can't succeed because he's black is ridiculous, right?
Well, good, then we have no problem.
And that's the problem with a lot of this, is that I completely agree that there are some silly things that have been said by people across the world, across the country, that I don't agree with, and most people on the liberals and left don't agree with as well. There's a lot of really silly stuff that's been said by Republicans as well. I don't think we have to go through it. We have a segment today where we're debunking the idea that 40% of people who took the Pfizer vaccine miscarried. There's been a lot of misinformation that's been happening.
We're having a conservative on to debunk that.
Yeah.
I mean, the person who put that statistic, we're going to talk about that in a minute, is Naomi Wolf, who is not a conservative whatsoever.
Nobody wants to claim Naomi Wolf. She's a person of her own. But I think the same is true of a lot of these people who have been saying things that I agree are not constructive or good. And I think there have been some liberal overreaches. But it concerns me when we have parents that are being kind of politicized along a certain kind of an agenda, that the founder of that agenda has been very explicit about having very little to do with an interest in kids' health or safety or educational value, but everything to do with kind of larger political instincts. And I think that it's very smart to use something that people are really concerned with to try to polarize the public, but I hope that people are also keeping in mind that there's a broader there are broader gains to be had by a certain movement that absolutely doesn't want to recognize that there could be anything along the lines of systemic inequities in our school system, various districts getting less funding than others, including districts because school funding is based on property taxes, including districts that have been historically redlined where Black people and brown people were forced to live because of restrictive covenants that only ended about 40 years ago, and which still largely create very segregated neighborhoods across this country. So that's the only concern I would have. But otherwise, congratulations to the people who voted in this election. And, they're going to be able to live how they want to live. And for the people who don't feel that way, who don't agree with these kinds of policies, they're going to have to realize that they have to get more politically engaged in their localities and or move to a different school district.
And that would be fine with me. I would feel the answer to this question of, instead of having these high-profile battles over what has to be taught, like in all schools in the state, why doesn't everybody just have their own school? Why don't you just get the education dollars that are being spent on you, and you can take them and go to a school that aligns with your values and your family's values, instead of making everyone, if we have disagreements, if some schools want to be more creative and more progressive-minded, and they can attract students, and that's fine with me. And then this majority of the parents in the state or in the district who want something less activisty or less infused with progressive norms around race and gender can do that. Isn't that better? Isn't that lead to less fighting? Yeah,
unfortunately, a lot of parents, it's really difficult to move school districts to find alternate educations for their kids. I think a lot of parents are unhappy with the educational quality that their schools are experiencing. There's funding issues. Teachers are under a lot of stress right now. They're being paid criminally low wages. They feel like they have to buy their own equipment for kids in the classroom. They're barely able to support themselves, and it's affecting the quality of education. So there are a lot of things going on, and I don't think we should be quite so flippant about the people's ability to vote with their feet in any context. But certainly a lot of people are trying to do that. I can't tell you how many times my own family moved to try to achieve better educational outcomes for my brother and I, who were really underserved in the public school that we went to, and the only one that we could afford to go to when we were living in North Carolina when I was a kid. So it's really near and dear, but as much as parents want, I remember shopping schools, going to Montessori schools, spending a day here and there and really loving it, but ultimately not being able to afford to go there.
I know someone who is sending their, I believe their 8th grader we were in New York schools. They're sending him to live with the grandparents in Ohio because they learned nothing throughout the pandemic in this school, had to repeat 8th grade. Sending them somewhere else, somewhere that actually has, like, in-class, stable, normal in-class, less restricted, less pandemic restricted and all that instruction.
Well, we're going to have to continue this conversation because there's a whole other world that's going on at the same time where there are these bans. J.D. Salinger was trending earlier this week because Catcher in the Rye has been banned.
Well, okay, but I will. The thing Stephen King shared this list of supposedly banned books in Florida. It's fake. It's completely fake. It's not true. It's a list of I believe it's a list that was assembled by like a library association of like all books that have ever been banned for any reason. Like some of those were banned for progressive reasons. Like the reason Huckleberry Finn doesn't get taught is not because conservatives are objecting to it.
I was talking about this with a teacher friend of mine, and we were agreeing that book bans that liberals have done in the past in the interest of not having kids exposed to the N-word were silly as these conservative book bans are now. I just wish there was that kind of free speech consistency when we're talking about places where, like Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, where books like Beloved were a crucial part of that race in the public conversation at the time. But like I said, I'm sure we'll have many opportunities to talk about that.
Nobody took down Stephen King for spreading misinformation, even though that list was made up.
You're all over it, Robby.
Interesting. All right, we'll have more.
I don't know about the Stephen King list. I'm not familiar with that, but
we'll have more Rising right after this.